Very good. So we want to give you a few tips about horticulture. And the thing that I wanted to point out to you is a lot of you guys, we talk about trees, turf, and tomatoes. And I know as you as agents get those questions all the time. And so I'm with Dr. Pascal. I mean, I'm for doing demonstrations so that you become the expert. And once you become the expert, don't sell yourself short. You are the expert, and so you become that expert. I would also encourage you start small. You can always increase the size, and I've heard it said several times today. You need to keep it simple. It doesn't have to be rocket science, and that's what I'm going to show you. Sometimes all you have to do is show up. I mean, you got some of these cooperators, producers, they're going to do it for you. And if you just go and act interested, you're going to learn more than they are, I can assure you. And the last thing I might point out is your demonstration must adapt to the grower and not vice versa. So let me show you a horror story that I got involved in. And this was applied research, and this is rainfall capture. And this is basically plastic covered beds. And so I moved down here to Uvalde from Stephenville, and we were working on water. And so we have all these pivots, and so we have all these corners. And I said, wow, we have the ability to show these guys how to do plastic mulch strip irrigation on the corners. And man, it's going to be a really big thing. And we could demonstrate the technique, and we could show them that it worked, but it did not adapt to their farming practice. And so it did not work out. And so your demonstration has to adapt to them. They're not going to adapt to you. And so you need to keep that in mind. So here we were able to grow a watermelon crop with no irrigation at all, where you simply came in here, put this bed ahead of time. You did this in January, captured the rain. You have holes here, so you capture the water, and so you save it. Then during the growing season, you're able to plant your watermelons. This is rainfall capture. Obviously, this is not. So different things you can do. Another simple demonstration that I think we overlook is, and part of the thing is the research, like they said a while ago, most of the research has been done. We know this stuff works, and basically you have to demonstrate it to your producers. Weed control and mulch. It obviously improves plant growth. You kill out vegetation, range of methods, chemical, mechanical. Everybody wants to get bogged down in chemical. Don't get bogged down in here. Just remember that it's weed control, and then you mulch. And so you can compare the growth of plants and should be the same plant type. So here we're doing a pecan. We've killed out the area here. Then we'll come back in and mulch it. You can compare that in yards. Here's obviously a tree not mulched. So, I mean, it's pretty day and night, and simple things that you can show these guys, in a homeowner situation to make that happen. Pheromone traps, a lot of insect things have been talked about. So we have a pheromone trap to control pecan nut case bearer. Basically, a trap is a monitoring tool. Oftentimes, the grower will often purchase and collect the data for you. It's just a matter of setting that up. Typically, you need 2 to 3 traps. And so a lot of county agents will do this in their county, where they put out 2 or 3 traps around the county. They'll run the traps and collect the data. And basically what it does is it gives an idea as to when to scout for pecan nut case bearer. And so you can become the expert real quick in your county by putting out a few of these traps. Not hard to do. The problem is you need to put them out early. So right now we're in middle case bearer, pecan nut case bearer time. And so if you put out a trap today and you catch moths tomorrow, then that information is useless because you have to have a zero starting point. And so basically it's a really simple demonstration you can do. Demonstrate when the moths are out there. Bottom line is you're trying to determine when these eggs are laid on the tips of the nutlets. And then you have 2 to 3 days to make a application of insecticide if you're going to spray, because this egg hatches out, it goes down, feeds on the buds, then comes back up and consumes the little nutlet. And so a world of good you can do in educating your producers, homeowners, whatever, as to when to spray for pecan nut case bearer. And one of the things that we've advocated in recent years is actually using this guy as a thinning mechanism when you have too big a crop. So that would be another demonstration that you could do. We've heard talk about soil tests. Soil testing is not rocket science, but I don't think two people ever do a soil test the same. And I really think the results that a lot of people get are because they don't take a sample properly. And I mean, I have a certain way that I take a soil sample. It may be wrong, may be right. I don't really know, but I practice this technique. It's been said we need more repetition, more samples. And so the number of subsoil samples that you take across the field is going to give you better data than if you just take one or two. So we say minimum of 8 to 10, also has to be a uniform field. And there's been talk about web soil survey so that you verify that. So good information. I personally sample from 1 to 6 and 6 to 12, 2 plastic buckets, mix up 2 samples. I got a 1 to 6 sample and a 6 to 12 sample that I send off. And so I think that gives very good information for any type of horticulture crops that you might want to grow. You know, we talk about fertilizing, putting out fertilizer. We know fertilizer improves plant growth. And ideally, we would base fertilizer on a soil test or soil pH. And so this goes along the lines of doing a soil test. But you know, a lot of people don't know where the roots are on plants, and they don't know where to put the fertilizer. You know, how often during the summer do you drive along the road and you see a producer with the water hose right at the trunk of the tree? And so they do the same thing with fertility as well. And so you can demonstrate that the roots are at the drip line and out, and that's where we need to be fertilizing these trees. You also have the different fertilizer types. You have nitrogen, very soluble, you lose it. And then you have phosphorus and potassium, which don't move very little, so you have to incorporate. So all simple things that you could do on fertility. One of the big ones that we've worked on quite a bit is correcting iron chlorosis. Iron chlorosis is a result of iron deficiency, not necessarily that the iron's not in the soil, just that the plant can't access it, typically caused by high soil pH from a lot of calcium. Virtually impossible to lower soil pH. You're going to have a lot of producers want to put on sulfur and sulfuric acid. And if your pH is 8.2, you're just wasting your time to think you're going to get it down low enough that you're going to take up iron from the soil. So typically just not available. And so you can compare iron chelate. There's a certain iron chelate that works better than other chelates. You also have iron sulfate. Chelates are not all the same. And this is the one that works, EDDHA. And so a simple demonstration can be comparing this chelate to some of the other chelates as well. The other nice thing in horticulture plants is we have certain rootstocks that can make a big difference. And so if you have a producer that's really into grapes, there is a specific rootstock we use when you have high soil pH, which would be an easy demonstration to do. Peaches, not so much, also pears, there's some. And so iron chlorosis, this is iron chlorosis here, interveinal chlorosis, a really severe case, and it can be corrected. And the best way is with a chelate on the soil. And so you could easily demonstrate how you can use iron chelate to correct iron deficiencies. There's a lot of work that could be done on tomatoes. You know, there's one thing that homeowners typically want to know about, and that's tomatoes. And all tomato varieties are not the same. And I don't think that we need to get bogged down in specific varieties, but the key is determinate, versus indeterminate. You know, determinate, they grow and they stop and they make fruit. Indeterminate, they continue to grow. And 9 times out of 10, determinate are far superior to indeterminate plants in a homeowner's backyard. And so you could easily demonstrate the difference between these two. The other thing is, a lot of people like to plant tomato plants way too early. You know, tomato plants like it hot. And so you could demonstrate where you plant up the transplants that you buy as opposed to direct planting. And you're going to get a 2-to-1 increase by doing this over here as opposed to this. Plastic wrap cages versus not, caged versus not. There's all kind of demonstrations that can be done on tomatoes. And tomatoes is probably one of the #1 things that you guys get questions on. And so if you become the expert in tomatoes in your county, that's a big feather in your cap. So here are tomato plants. These are transplants that were bought. You see how they've been potted up into these larger containers. You grow them till they're larger in size. You already have other plants in the garden that you planted when you bought them. And all you got to do is compare plant size when you plant these to those. And then you follow the plants along till you get to harvest. These are going to harvest sooner. And you're also going to harvest more fruit off of these particular plants right here. But a simple thing that you can demonstrate. We've done a lot of work with cages. A lot of farmers don't like cages, but also creating a mini greenhouse, so to speak. So here is a typical demonstration field where plants have been caged. Some have been plastic wrapped, others have not. So you compare the plant growth, it's almost 2-to-1. This had plastic wrap, this had none. You have two things that work here though, and so you'd have to take that into play if you were going to collect data and do applied research here, because you got the cage. And if you did not cage this plant now, then this plant would lay on the ground and you would lose fruit from that. So the ideal situation, if you wanted to compare here, we would have to now cage these, and then you could compare the yield versus those. Here are uncaged plants, and I can assure you that a caged plant will out yield, these plants out here will out yield these. 25 pounds, this will make 25, this will make 10, probably 15-pound increase. I mean, that will vary by variety, but simple things that you can demonstrate on tomatoes would help a lot. We also have a lot of pollination of cucurbit crops. Cucurbit crops, you got squash, cantaloupe, watermelons, cucumbers. Insects are required. Typically it's honeybees. Most people think if a bee visits the flower one time, the fruit has been pollinated, but that's not true with cucurbits. Typically, it takes a minimum of 15 visits by the bees. And so a simple demonstration would be to cover cucurbit plants with grow web, exclude insects, and then see exactly what gets pollinated on those plants where you exclude insects. You could also demonstrate hand pollination and point out the difference between the flowers. You know, with cucurbits, you have female flowers, which have the little fruit here, and then you have the male flowers, which only have the flower and they don't have the little squash. And so the bees have to visit the males and they have to go to the females. That has to happen a minimum of 15 times to have a well-developed fruit. This is especially critical on cucumbers and watermelons. So when you have deformed fruit, a lot of times that's a pollination issue. And so you can demonstrate that insects are indeed important in making that happen. Probably the most impossible thing that you would ever try to get homeowners to do, or even commercial growers, is to thin fruit. I mean, you can get them to maybe do it, but oftentimes they're not going to do it. I was talking to a guy the other day. He showed me some pictures of this fruit. And this is a guy that's, I mean, he knows what he's doing. And he showed me pictures. I said, now, Tony, you need to go home and you need to take part of those fruit off. And he just looked at me with his eyes. And I said, you're not going to do it, are you? He said, no, not going to do it. And I said, Tony, you really need to do it. And so I don't know, I may have convinced him to thin one branch, but probably not the whole tree. But you can thin one tree, another not, measure fruit size, return set, works on a lot of different crops. We used to didn't think this worked on pecans, but it is a big to-do on pecans today. The big one where fruit are thin, of course, are peaches. These are peaches that were not thinned properly. In my revised PowerPoint that I wasn't able to find, I have the new slides. I have some other slides here that I wanted to show you, but we would like a fruit about every 12 to 15 inches. And so these fruit here are not going to get near as big as they could if we would have taken a lot of these fruit off. So another simple demonstration that you can do that will show that. Along the way, you got to debunk some myths and misinformation. So this is a pecan tree. These are zinc coated nails. And this guy swore that if he drove these zinc coated nails into this tree, that the tree would take up the zinc. And this is just like the iron from iron filings. You know, you have a lot of people take the filings and they'll put it around a tree and think that that will correct iron chlorosis, and it will not. So same thing with zinc coated nails. So anyway, it does not work. So simple zinc applications. Here's zinc, here's not. Obviously this is a freak leaf, but it makes for a good demonstration photo there. Last thing that I wanted to point out, there's other simple demonstrations that you can do where you can just show techniques. You know, we talk about open center pruning on stone fruit trees and why we do that and the importance of doing that. And commercially, our guys got to do it because they can't have their labor on ladders. All the fruit has to be picked from the ground. And so we want to keep the trees low in stature so the harvest can take place on the ground. We want to keep the center open so that we get light into the center, so that we get fruit all over the tree. And so you can take a tree like this, demonstrate the proper technique to do that. So here's before pruning, here's after pruning, where we've opened up the center, we've left our 1-year-old wood, and so we've left light. And so you can demonstrate that you're going to have fruit production year in and year out by doing this. Not only are you improving the health of the tree by doing this, by not allowing it to overcrop, but you're also increasing the fruit quality because fruit size will be a lot larger. So another simple deal that we can do. The other thing you can do is you can demonstrate different things that happen when you prune. So when you prune on a tree, if you take a limb that's larger than 1 inch off, that tree is going to put on a strong shoot the next spring. And you can simply go out here and rub these shoots off, rub them off, and then you don't have to prune those out during the growing season or during the dormant season after this year's growth. So another simple thing that you can do to demonstrate doing proper techniques during the growing season will pay big dividends in the long run. So in summary, my advice is to start small, keep it simple. And what we're trying to do with these demonstrations is gain credibility with not only your producers, but your homeowners as well. And I can assure you, you will learn a lot from your cooperator. And like I told you, a lot of times you just got to show up and they'll train you. They'll tell you what you need to be doing. So don't overlook that opportunity of getting to work with these cooperators and getting a lot of great information. We have a lot of our distinguished county horticulturists on the call today. And so they can help y'all. If y'all have questions about different horticulture demonstrations, they would be able to help you do that as well. And so with that, I'll stop talking and we'll see if there's any questions. And again, I apologize for my slow start of sharing my presentation.
And thank you, Dr. Stein. Very good. Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Stein or Dr. Paschal? Well, if you do, you can always reach Larry at the Uvalde Center. I know he's got an email there, and I know he checks it fairly regular. And so give Larry or Dr. Pascal one an email. I'm sure they'll be happy to answer any questions you might have in the future. Or pick up the phone and give them a call. They might be hard to catch at the office. Because they don't hang around the office very much. They're out in the field doing work most of the time. So anyway, we'll move on from here and thank these guys again for their presentation. Next, we're going to have Bob McCool, and Bob is a County Extension Agent Ag and Natural Resources out of San Patricio County. Asked Bob to visit with y'all a little bit about the good data collection, as well as the value of photography, using photographs, using various video techniques to emphasize and to truly utilize a visual depiction of what's going on in the field. Sometimes help drives the message home even better than a bunch of numbers will do. So, Bob, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you've got the floor for the next few minutes.
So, good morning to all, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you this morning. Dr. Shackleford a couple of weeks ago asked me to talk a little bit about using imagery, video to help collect data, and also to create maybe some educational pieces within while you're working on your result demonstrations and out in the plots and such. So the old adage, picture worth 1,000 words, kind of be our theme this morning, and just I'm hoping to maybe spur some people to think a little outside of the box, to use images and videos a little more often. I know I am a visual learner. I know from our educational classes, several types, and I know that I like visual learning somewhat more than some of the others. You can show me a picture and I can put something together and give me directions, and I have a little harder time. So just again, want to hopefully maybe show you some of the things I've done, but also maybe spur you to think about while you're doing some of your result demonstration work, that how you can get some more information and educational material out to people. So in this first slide here, I mean, you can see the demonstration sign there. There's a QR code, there's a flag in the background. You can actually see, if you looked in the right of that picture, that there's several varieties or hybrids of grain sorghum over to the right top corner. But that picture alone, if you go to the next one, I mean, you can see the flag right over the top. That's what I normally do, is put that flag out on the very first row. For any that hasn't done row crop stuff, be sure to get that flag out when the tractor goes by and the planter goes by, because it's sure hard to tell sometimes if you don't do it right then. Put it dead center in the seed track, because that's less likely to get run over there than it is anywhere else. But several things in this picture, and that's one of them that you can kind of illustrate that thing needs to be out there, and I try to put it centered or thereabouts across the sign. One of the other things, make mention just the sign itself. You can get these sent to you through the extension. I think at the moment they're backlogged on them and don't have any available, but these are available to you to order, and I think they give you so many a quarter or a year, so you can find these with the extension. One of the other things I want to make mention is when you're doing these images and stuff, taking pictures, be sure to take multiple pictures, one portrait and one landscape. As you can see here, this was a portrait and it doesn't fit in the frame right, so I had to distort it. So it's just a little, I know I'm talking to the choir with most of this information, but as I've gone through and done some of these things, there's a few tricks, and by no means am I an expert on all this, but you do get some tricks along the way. And taking multiple pictures in different ways helps down the road and being able to put this material together and have it right. So you also saw the QR code. This is another little trick that image that I have done. I started doing this, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. It's just a QR code. I had the crops committee give me some money. I went to Fast Signs, had these stickers made so that I can put them on the edges of the signs. Used to, I think a lot of people would tape a mason jar, put the plot maps and such in the mason jar, screw the lid on it, so people would have how the hybrids were situated within the test. Well, this is a little more simple way to do it. Not only can you scan a code, but if some of your people that want to look are a little more challenged technology wise, at least they can probably type the URL into the search bar and get to the county website. But this QR code goes to my county website so that they can get the field maps directly from right there and walk out there and find out which hybrids are what. Okay, again, thinking about what we do and how we can have an educational piece by pictures or videos or whatever. I'd call this a data collection toolkit for grain and cotton. And as you can see, really about all you need for cotton is a paper bag and a pen, a clipboard, and a bale scale. So it's not a whole lot to that. When you go into the collecting the grain and the corn, you know, you'll need a moisture tester and a bushel weight scale. And what also is not included here is a picture of the grain buggy. And also, I didn't really have a good picture of Dr. McGinty, but you will definitely want to include your specialists in these demonstrations and keep them informed and involved and keep yourself out of trouble. Is also, you'll see a flag there. The tip of the flag's not visible, but I wanted to make notice about the buckets, the beakers, and the stakes. With the plastics and cotton problem now, we don't recommend using plastic flags at all. So I've gone to using mainly these plastic stakes to mark the hybrids or varieties in the field. Just makes it easier to have one thing. These things are cheap, get them from Gimblers, but it's one of those things that use on a regular basis when we start the process. And don't forget your hat and water, because most of the time it's hot, and it's even though a lot of times you may not think that the time factor will be of any problem, and you'll get back fairly. Sometimes it takes way longer, so don't forget your water and your hat. So, but and your measuring wheel and such. So anyway, that's just kind of a way to get you to see that many things. And you saw there that there was a sampler that I got caught one year with some short rows and not much grain would get into the grain buggy, so I had to come up with a way to get it out. If you don't get approximately 1,500, 2,000 pounds in the weigh wagon, it will not come out the sample hole on the side. So anyway, just a patent pended grain sample collector that had to, on the spur of the moment, put together, and you can just see it's kind of a deal, but it does work. But you'll never know what you might need once you get there. So just a quick point about these plot maps, and you can see here these are plain Jane 1 to however many reps you have there, or plots, so to say. And I do it this way, and this is just a tidbit of information that might help out at some point in time. Of course, we're row crop mainly, so we're talking about you know, rows and number of rows and length of rows. But anyway, if you go to the next slide, it makes it easier for the guys driving the tractor. I used to try to do some fancy things with these, and they always had to change them. But as you can see from the two different pictures there, one is the grain and one's the cotton, and each one of these tractor drivers have their own little way of putting this information down so that they can put it into their GPS or be able to follow their GPS and make things a lot easier to get planted for them and us. And thus far, it's worked well. These guys are really good at what they do. So if you can just give them a start, they usually have the ability to figure out a way to make it happen. Again, this is just a simple picture of one of the interns we had at one point in time, taking the bushel weight on some corn, the weigh wagon in the background. You see on the side up there above her shoulder, there's a little door. That's what I'm talking about. If you don't get enough grain in there, you got to figure out a way to get it out. But anyway, just a quick picture there that helps. And the point I wanted to make with this particular deal, this is what we use, or I use to write the weights down while we're collecting the cotton and weighing the cotton bales, modules in the field. My point that I want to make here is that take a picture of this fairly often, and with any of your other information that you're collecting. The wind blows a lot down here, and you never know. Turn around and it's your paper's going somewhere else. Well, just take pictures on a regular basis, at least after every rep, so that you don't lose that data. Because if you do that, it's hard to. Cotton would not be so hard, but with some of the grain and the corn data, it would be very difficult to reproduce. So this is just a picture, an illustration of sometimes what effort goes into getting the data collected on these result demonstrations or these crop trials. This particular picture was not done at one of our result demonstrations, but I was asked to come help several seed companies to help collect their data on these field trials. And it's just funny, or it's kind of interesting that you know, you have all this equipment, but the information that comes out of these trials is very valuable, and a lot of people want to see it. They use it, and then in turn, if you're involved in these result demonstrations or these field trials, you're actually having a hand in the advancement of some of the genetics and stuff, just for the fact that you're the ones that are getting those tests done and the data collected. So it does become a fun exercise for me to do these things. But there again, we can see the amount of effort that goes into these result demonstrations with this picture. But going forward, the data that we collect is very important. So thinking out of the box, and hopefully some of you will, within these demonstrations, not only sometimes are you just looking for yield or whatever you're looking for. In our case, it's usually yield tests that we do, whether it's the corn yield or the sorghum or cotton. It's about how much they make. Well, there's also room sometimes and things that can happen that you can see a way to do another demonstration. Dr. McGinty and I put this one together from the race trial results. We just basically took the data from the research, little research gin. We had a commercial gin that was doing the ginning on the cotton, and then we took samples large enough to send to the Texas Tech microgin. And so we compared the three ginning processes. There's been some talk over time that sometimes our research gins don't have some of the most reliable information, but we were able to show that you know, really all three ginning processes are pretty similar in coming up with with the varieties that tend to be at top and the things that we're looking for. So it's just a way to use the demonstration plot to go further and do a little more with what we had. So now change gears just a little bit. There's been several times that I've used the research demonstration plots to do some video work. Just wanted to kind of show you some of this work and maybe talk. And like I said, many of you've already done this. You see the problems, know what happens when you're outside. But anyway, I'm just going to see if I can get this to play a minute. But to begin with, you'll hear the wind, and down here, that's one of the issues that I've had a lot of trouble with is wind problems and being able to get around that when making the videos. But I'm just going to kind of go through this pretty fast and just kind of show you what kind of happened. Pardon, I'm too fast. Just make note that all these videos and pictures was done with the iPhone and the iPad, like the iPad on the stand there. So you can get some pretty good material with just your phone and your iPad. So I'm just kind of scrolling through here to kind of show you what's there and how it was put together. So there again, there's multitude of ways that you can get some video and make it and have it usable. This particular video, and both of these, I went to these fields once a week or as soon as I could. Some of them were 10 days, 2 weeks, depending on some weather patterns or rain or something like that. And I was a little tardy, but again, I was able to go. This was a research demonstration cotton plot that I went to on a primarily weekly basis, and took all the. You can hear the wind and stuff causes issues that. So both of these videos were made kind of without any type of sound other than what was natural there. I have been able to use these in different educational presentations, especially with youth or organizations that want to know about corn, want to know about cotton, want to see. There's so many people that they see these crops around them all the time, but they really don't have any idea all that goes in, the time it takes. They see them over time and never realize, but these presentations have actually been used quite a few times with Ag in the Classroom, and like I said, civic organizations, and they're available for anybody to use if they so desire. So at the end of the day, after have done some of this, Dr. Hale and his group took what had been done in the videos, and they were able to actually put out a piece for the Path to the Plate. So Dr. Shackleford asked to just go ahead and play this whole deal. So it's about a little over 3 minutes. So I'll go ahead and turn it on and hope you can hear it.
And as you'll see, it takes about 7 to 8 days for germination to take place on ideal conditions. And as it starts to emerge, you can see the fresh cotyledon with the seed coat still attached. This seed coat and the color that is there is predominantly in treatments that come with the seed. Those are basically fungicides and insecticides that will help protect that tiny plant for about 30 days. Okay, this seed coat that you see here in these pictures will stay with that plant for about 1 day, and then it'll eventually dry up and break off, and that's what you also see laying at the bottom of the cotyledon. And then in about 45 days after emergence, we have what we call the first square. And then about 60 to 65 days after emergence is when we have our first flowers. Okay, as we progress through this cotton crop, there's certain things that you will see appear that almost look like a little small green egg, and that is what we call a boll. And that boll forms for about 55 days from flowering until when that boll will actually open. And as we progress on through, we will eventually see what the bolls, when they get dry and pop, how they will appear, and the cotton fibers will be easily seen. And ready to pop, we've gone through another 65 days of cotton life. As you see here is a cotton picker, and the cotton picker goes and it pulls the fibers from the bolls and puts it back in there, and the module that it'll put it in is like a big round bale. Those round bales weigh approximately 4,000 pounds when they're finished. They're wrapped in a plastic wrap, and so the module truck can come get it. As you see, with these bales moving, the module truck has a live conveyor floor that actually pulls the modules inside the truck to be hauled to the gin. And the quick glimpse of all the modules that are on the yard, we now see a module being put on the conveyor to go into the gin, and as it gets on the conveyor, the bale will be torn up and put into smaller pieces so that it can progress to the gin stands. Okay, as the cotton is torn up and moved into the gin stands, as you see here, the cotton is moved through these gin stands, and the lint and the seed are separated. The seed falls one place, the trash goes another, and the fiber goes toward the press. As we begin to look at the press process, the cotton that the fiber is then moved to what is called the press, and it presses approximately 500 pounds of cotton into a bale. And as we can see, the straps that are being applied to the bale, and then as it is released, it goes taut against the straps. It's moved over and then gone up. It goes up another conveyor to where it is sacked, and in the sacking process, it's moved through that out into the warehouse, and then 4 bales will be stacked together in order to be placed on a truck. That's the way that those bales will be stacked into the truck, headed to the textile mill or to the warehouse where they'll be housed until sold.
With that, I don't have any more information or anything, if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to try to answer. But again, if you want or need any of those videos, you can find them on the sampatricio.agrilife.org website, or I can try to get them to you, or I guess they're actually available in this presentation from Rebecca maybe, or however you send them, but they are available if anybody wants to use them.
Great, thank you, Bobby. Appreciate your presentation. That was very good. We're going to move on, and for the interest of time, and this morning to kind of wrap things up, we're going to talk about a pretty important aspect of this kind of work, and Bobby actually hit on it a little bit. Is related to the economic impact of some of these practices. Agriculture in general sometimes has a little bit of a romantic overtone to it, and but I can remember my grandpa saying a long time ago that the romance leaves you pretty quick if you're going broke. If you're going broke, it's not very romantic. And so we've asked Dr. David Anderson to visit with you a little bit about analyzing these demonstrations to determine some economic returns that might be beneficial in reporting data to producers. So, Dr. Anderson, floor is yours.
All right, Daryl. Hey, thanks. I want to thank everybody for inviting me as an economist to do part of this too. I I had to laugh at that. As someone who has chopped cotton at one point in their life, the word romance never entered my thinking. I think it was more like a lesson in why you ought to go to college. But I'm certainly glad to be with you all today, talk a little bit about economic analysis of this, because I think it really it gets to heck, we're kind of interested in dollars and cents of a lot of these things as well. I've listened in on all the presentations from the 27th and today as well. And I really think hopefully what I'm going to hit today really builds on those, because I think they all dovetail together. What we want to look at as economists and what we want to get to at dollars and cents builds on everything else that's all the way from the design, the demonstration, the different trials, the works, whether it's livestock or crops or horticultural crops or whatever. I think this all fits together pretty well. I also want to say thanks to my colleagues. While I'm the one doing the presentation, I get to work with a pretty great group of ag economists, and there's a group of us who have all done a little bit of this over the years, and I kind of think of us as a team, and they've all given me some input along the way for this as well. There's about 3 areas I want to cover. One is really kind of getting started, thinking about it as an economic analysis. We're going to do something very simple and just look at some budgets, a partial budget, and how we want to use that, not only to put numbers together, but in thinking about what it is we need to gather as well. And then I want to touch on a couple of little bit deeper analysis that I think we can use some of this in that maybe we haven't quite tapped enough in the past. I think we could do some more of. And so with that, that's kind of where I'm headed. The first thing I would say is, in getting started, as we think about it as economists, one of the things that I guess I'd start with a request that, if you're thinking about the economic impact or economic comparisons of whatever trial you're working on, I think it's always kind of helpful to get one of us at the beginning of the project to kind of be there at the beginning, mainly because having done some of these over time, we usually come in at the end and we'll say something like, well, hey, we need this, what's this different thing? What's this process that was different? What's the cost associated with that? And then everybody looks at each other and say, oh crap, we didn't write that down. And so, or maybe we didn't take a picture of that. And so I think it helps if one of us is in there sort of at the beginning with the rest of you. We can stop and think through as economists what we need to get, so to get it, to get that data as we go, so we don't get to the end and think, well, shoot, I wish we'd have done this, or I wish we'd have gotten that data. And so really kind of early in the process, I think, is important, so we don't miss out on something towards the end of it. I put there at the kind of that last bullet, multiple year trials. I think sometimes we may have some things we look at that have multiple year benefits or costs, particularly if some things, if we're really looking at some new technology that may have a longer payout period or something like that. If we want to look at profitability, I think that's important. Some of our production processes may have benefits that last multiple years, whether it's grazing, or maybe fertilizer trials, or crop rotational things, or cover crops, or something like that, may very well have multiple year benefits. And so we want to think about that ahead of time, so that we capture some of that. Maybe we have some first year benefits and costs, or profits, but we may have some that extend longer, and you want to make sure we plant that seed in people's minds that there's going to be multiple years of benefits. And thinking about that ahead of time, I think, really helps a lot. As an economist, I kind of think of some of our interests I sort of say take multiple forms, and the first one is really, production. That's the simple one. I think a lot of my colleagues, our colleagues talking ahead of me, we've talked a lot about, you've seen on examples, yields, average yields through whatever test plot it is, or different trials. We're really interested in those average yield differences. As economists, we're interested in that variability too, because as we get into some deeper analysis, certainly the variability gives us some statistical differences. But it also lets us do some other stuff later on. And so not just average yields, but yield variability, I think, is important as well. While we talk about yields a lot, we're also, as economists, a lot of times interested in quality, because with some of our crops, a lot of them have premiums and discounts. Can we see some quality differences? Can we measure quality differences? If we're doing something with testing, we might very well be testing a quality difference that brings value. One of the things that was on my mind a couple of years ago, again, a drought program, quite honestly, as we were really interested in looking at different hay qualities. If we're testing bales or whatever, where we identify that quality, I think we can track a value to quality, and a value to that quality that leads us to targeting that hay quality to the nutritional needs of the animals that it's going to. So instead of just putting every hay bale out there or whatever, without thinking about the nutritional needs of the animals, we may actually be money ahead by targeting the quality of the hay to the nutritional needs of the animals, and fine tune some dollars and cents. And I think that's an example that was sort of on my mind at one time, a couple of years ago, that's on my mind again, that if we know what those qualities are, we can actually target that. And I think we end up ahead. There's a value to testing. There's also a cost to testing. And so that benefit cost analysis, I think, is kind of an untapped area, particularly in some of our soil testing, hay quality testing, things like that. We're also interested in costs, your variable, cash costs, capital costs, the cost of running another trip down the field if we're doing some things that look at alternatives or trade-offs, and there's also costs, that are multi-year, that may also have benefits multi-year. And as I was making some notes getting ready for this morning, I think there's a couple of things that are really of interest that we may be looking at doing some more in. And I think certainly some of our colleagues are already working in, that have multiple year costs and benefits that deal with, production systems. But a couple things that popped into my mind are some of the stuff about carbon and carbon sequestration in the soil are really multi-year kinds of programs. Cover crops, regenerative ag, if we use that kind of term, really are multi-year changes. And so I think we might want to think about not just that 1 year, but how stuff stretch out over a bunch of years within a crop rotation. And some, we might get some changes in next year's, the following crops, yields or costs that are related to what we did last year. I think if we can capture some of those and think about it ahead of time, I think there's some great opportunities to do even more kind of economic analysis of what we're doing, in whether it's result demonstrations, applied research. I think our basic tool as economists, as we think about doing this, is really what we call a partial budget. We're going to line up these alternatives, and we're going to go right down through some costs and returns and get to a bottom line difference. And whether we talk about just a change in profitability, a benefit cost ratio, however we want to do that, it kind of starts here. Beyond just a spreadsheet or a piece of paper to write these things down, we can line up these alternatives next to each other. I think ahead of time, it's also a good way to start to think about our data. What do we need, and are we forgetting something? And I'm going to show an example I pulled right off of our Ag Economics Extension website. It's a budget that we might use from this. We have various tools that we can use for things like this, but of course, you pull the thing off of there and the print's too dang small. I look like a researcher doing a presentation, but I think on the big screen, maybe you can see it a little better. But I just took a wheat grazing budget, and I just wanted to show at the top of that, we've got revenue. If we're thinking about average pounds, quality premiums or discounts, we're going to get that in up there at the top and calculate a new total revenue for each trial that we're doing or each result demonstration. So we got a base or a control, and we got our alternatives. If I go down through my variable costs there, seed, fertilizer, custom charges, miscellaneous stuff, herbicides, insecticides, that's where some stuff may change from one plot to the next, one trial to the next, one row to the next, or one, our head of livestock to the next. And that's where we're going to capture those. A whole bunch of these might be exactly the same. If it's something that requires maybe some more tractor work, we're going to get some cost changes there, but maybe not in other parts. And as we go on down through the costs, we get a whole bunch of costs. We'll sum up our costs. We're going to subtract that away from our revenues, and we're going to get a bottom line number by each of the things that we've tried. I've included the little part of fixed costs there just to get, are we investing in some long-term stuff that requires some principal and interest payments that are going to be around forever? Seems like forever till you get stuff paid off. But again, to capture that notion of some longer term, more than 1 year changes, I think is worth considering up front. I really think, what we do as economists really links together with what we do on the production side of it. Whether we have these replicated trials, the data we get out of that is what we're going to use then in our economic analysis. And I think that this statistical analysis part is, we really get at some real, I put in quotation marks, some real differences. But not only do we do that on the production trial part of it, I think Joe Pascal was using an example where several of us have been involved in getting those prices at auction markets and really looking at characteristics of animals that change prices and premiums and price slides, that we're really interested in some production practices that get you a bang for your buck. But we also want to look at statistical differences in returns and costs, particularly net returns or profit. Sometimes I've seen a couple of examples of this where we might not see, might not see statistical differences on the production part, the yields or something like that. Yet when we get to net returns, we actually can see some statistically significant results. And so what may seem small on one point, when we get to taking returns minus costs to a net difference, can actually be more important. And so we really want to look at some of those things too in an economist sense. Just looking at some bottom line stuff, I think is pretty useful. When I take a step beyond our basic, most simple budgeting, partial budget type analysis, some of the things we want to get into as economists and as a team, as we think of all of us working together, as we always have, from our production scientists, our county extension agents, and us as economists, some of the things we can do go to step beyond this basic, simple partial budget. And I want to make note of some simulation modeling, for one, where we really want to take that variability that we get out of the production trials, and we want to do some more in-depth modeling on what that might say the variability of returns is, or the risk to returns of doing these things. Because sometimes we get some differences in means, but we also may get some differences in the variance. And we want to take a look at that and look at the probability of outcomes, because we may very well be looking at some things that not only does it increase the mean, so we're going to get more production or higher quality production, but we might also shrink that yield variability that actually has some meaning in decision making, and I think there's that range of outcomes can be very important. And a lot of the rest of some of the economic work we do, we're interested in that probability distribution. What's the odds of a positive outcome? And I think we can do some of that with this data, as well as we think about going beyond and what we need to do that. So that's an area where that variability of yield is really important and useful for us as we look at some of this stuff. The other thing I wanted to mention is, we want to get beyond a budget to kind of a whole farm analysis sometimes. Sometimes what we may be doing with some crops or rotational things or livestock related things has an interaction to the next year's production, the next crop on the same land. Maybe what we see in terms of effects further down the line in our breeding system or something like that. And we want to look at some longer term whole farm type analysis to really capture those interactions, because there are some applications where we might be looking at where that part's important to consider. And so if we think about this, getting this data and pulling the whole thing together, I think we have some neat opportunities to build to some more in-depth analysis as well. All of which I think have some real positive, outcomes in terms of getting more information to folks out on the land who are making decisions using the kind of work we're doing. The last thing I really want to say too is I think about our resources that we have in our ag economics group. We got a host of budgets. Many of you help us with doing our cost and returns budgets. We've got those that have been converted to where you can put in your own numbers. That's what I showed earlier. We got a host of decision aids. We got some economic expertise that I'm really proud of in my colleagues. And in fact, I think that's our most important resource is our people. Kind of that first bullet, Samuel, Zapata, Jason, Justin Benavides, Pancho, Abello, and Blake are our district economists. Many of you may have worked with them already. I know Samuel has done some stuff using some simulation modeling with some of our result demonstration trials. And so, I think we got some really great expertise to help on the economic side in building that into some of the demonstrations that we do. And I include some of our state specialists, Mark Welch, John Robinson, Stephen Close, and myself that do a lot of things. While I'm really the livestock marketing economist, I help out on a lot of different projects, as well as I know my colleagues do as well. And so I really wanted to highlight that if you're curious about, okay, I'm going to try something new and going to start this new project, who do I need to grab? This is a pretty good starting point on the list, and we all tend to work together and help each other as well. And I really want to highlight that I think my colleagues are our best resource in this, and we're here to help you guys as be resources to you all as we do this really applied research on the ground. And so I didn't want to do this without a plug to my colleagues as well. And with that, heck, I'm just going to say a big thank you for Daryl. Thank you for putting me on the program and including me in this. I really do appreciate it, because I do think, in some ways, the economic part of it is kind of some unplowed ground that I think we can make a lot more kind of inroads in some of this work that would, I think, have a positive impact for all of us. And with that, I talk pretty fast, so what the heck. Y'all got any questions for me?
Okay, well, appreciate it very much, David. Thank you for being on today and enlightening everybody.
I'm glad to be on. Thank you, Daryl.
We're gonna take a break now for lunch, and we got quite a lengthy lunch hour. So we will be ready to start on session 4 today. We'll begin at 2 p.m. So be ready to go at 2 o'clock. Give you a little time to catch a bite to eat and maybe catch up a little bit in your office, but we'll be back at 2 o'clock. To analyze the data that we have collected, as well as how to a format to put that together, and a few tips on technical writing and putting together reports that might be helpful to growers and producers in your counties. To kick things off this afternoon, we have Dr. Phillip Shackleford. Dr. Shackleford is the regional program leader in the Southeast region. Has a long history of excellent work in the area of result demonstration and applied research. And so, Phillip, I'm going to turn it over to you to visit with them a little bit about analyzing data and some of the data that's important.
Well, again, I had a really good opening statement too, so I apologize that y'all missed that. But no, it's good to be here with you, sharing information about result demonstrations. I know I reflect back on my time as a county extension agent, and I really enjoyed that. Putting together result demonstrations. I enjoyed working with cooperators. I enjoyed working with the chemical company reps and seed company reps, and you really got a chance to build a good rapport with all those people. And so result demonstrations kind of have a special place in my heart, just from the fact that that was a way that I was able to build a program. And so I want you to go into this thinking about that, how you can build your program, how you can make it better by making good result demonstrations. And, that starts with finding all those things that were mentioned previously, finding the good cooperators, finding the people that can help you along. But what I've been asked to talk about with you today is analysis of data. Now, I know that makes a lot of people cringe whenever they talk about that, because they harken back to maybe a bad experience they had in Algebra 1 or in geometry or something like that. But we're not going to dive off into analysis of variance or performing t-tests here today. I think really what I would like to accomplish today is just give you some common sense approaches to collecting some of that information, how to stay consistent with it, and then what are the best ways that we can communicate that, because we have a lot of good information that come out of these things, or we should have. And so how can we best get that information out to our customers, our producers, the people that need to know that information? So with that, let's dive off into the presentation. So as an agent, I always ask myself, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this result demonstration? So the biggest thing I can say, whenever I did result demonstrations, I did them
to answer the question. So, and what I mean by that is people would call me and they would ask me questions about something, a best management practice, for instance, and I would give them an answer, typically right out of the extension publication or something that I had been able to read, knowing that it was research-based. But for me, I wanted to actually see that. I actually wanted to know what it was. And so, and there could have been some variations of that report. So it could have had a statement in there that says it may be different when your pH level is this, or it may be different if this. And so I wanted to know for myself what the answer to that question was. And so with that, that's how I formulated the idea of what can I do for a demonstration to figure out that answer. So the answer was already there, but I wanted to see how it worked in my county. I wanted to find that answer out. How does it work here in Ellis County, in Johnson County, in Stevens County, in Austin County? That's all the counties that I was affiliated with. How does it work in each one of those counties? So that was the underlying premise behind why I did demonstrations, because I wanted to know the answer and I wanted to know how it worked in my county. And I know that Dr. Parker shared this statement with you because he showed me his slide set before he put it together, but this is exactly the way we do extension work today is, you know, just like exactly what Seaman Knapp said back in 1903. But I can tell you that statement is very, very true, because if you participate in it and you see it and you do it, and then you're able to convey that information to someone else, then guess what? You become the expert in that subject. Now, you may not be the expert in all of beef cattle ranching. Okay. You may not be the expert in all of cotton or wildlife or range management or forages. You may not be the expert in that whole broad subject, but you can be the expert in grasshoppers, fire ants, weed control, you know, worming on cattle. So whatever it is, I mean, you could be the expert, and the people that have been in that industry in your county and doing that for 50 plus years, all of a sudden they're calling you because they heard you had the answer to that. And then you become the expert and a trusted source. So result demonstrations build that credibility in a county. And so, you know, it's not a check the box. Don't ever think that it's just because your RPO and your DEA says you got to have 2 result demonstrations, preferably in an in-depth category. Don't ever think that. This has helped you build your credibility in your county. So when it comes to designing, and I know you've heard this before too, when it comes to designing that result demonstrations, you're going to try to answer that question. And so a good rapport with a specialist is going to be imperative. Consult with that specialist to help come up with the protocol and the design of what that needs to look like. In my own head, I can come up with maybe a few thoughts or ideas, but our specialists, that's what these folks are for. They deal in that scientific realm all the time. And so they're able to convey things down to our producer level, but they also have a very scientific mind. And so they work with these protocols and they work with these designs. So whenever we're talking about coming up with the idea, let them work with you on designing a proper protocol. So, and, you know, and we talk about gathering that information, part of the protocol is going to be, you know, this is what needs to be collected. And this is how often it needs to be collected. It may be every month. It may be in the beginning of when we plant it, and it may be at the end when we harvest it, or it could be every week. Okay. Or it could be every day for 5 days. I mean, I've done demonstrations all those ways, but I'll let that specialist tell me what the best protocol was going to be to gather the information that was going to be needed. So, but they're going to have a better handle on that. And then at the end of that data collection time frame, we're going to gather in all that information that we've got. And hopefully you're not gathering it all and just mailing it to them all at one time, or transferring that electronically all at one time. Maybe you kind of built up a system where you send them information on a regular basis. That's probably more ideal, but send them that information. And instead of me running through, you know, ANOVA calculators and t-tests and things like that with you, I let them run those numbers for you. And then from that, you can determine a little bit about what's important, what the findings actually said about answering the question of how it works in my county. So what kind of data is important? You know, think about your audience. Who are you going to be presenting this to? So we have that standardized format that Mr. Bachelor is going to talk about to you after I get through talking with our result demonstration report. But also think a little bit deeper than that. How can I convey this information in a form that was going to be usable and readable and interesting to a reader, a passerby, a casual observer? So what's the audience going to be? Is it going to be a fellow researchers in a very technical presentation where they give you 15 minutes to present and they give you a 5-minute warning and a 2-minute warning and they cut you off after 15 minutes? That's going to be a little bit different. But if it's the average, you know, cow-calf guy, when you're talking about result demonstrations in beef cattle, think about that guy with how you convey the information. So what kind of information does that person need specifically? And is it going to be yield data? Is it going to be dollars and cents? You know, which one's going to work the best? Which practice works the best? Which chemical works the best? So what kind of information does that guy need? And in what format do they need it in? Again, we have our standardized format that we utilize in extension, and that's really good because it follows it. It's very implicit, and it talks about that scientific process of reporting your findings. But we can report our results in a whole lot of different ways. We don't have to just follow that format, especially if we want that information to get out. And again, result demonstration should not be a check the box kind of thing. I got to do this to make my RPO happy. I got to do this to make my DEA happy. Don't think of it in that regard. Think of it as you are answering the question and you are conveying useful, timely, research-based information to the people in your county. So collecting the data, the biggest obstacle in life, the biggest obstacle in parenting, the biggest obstacle in our professional careers, the biggest obstacle that we have to overcome in agriculture is time. So we oftentimes, as county agents, RPLs, DEA specialists, we all do it because we're human. We don't set aside enough time to make to do the job right. So make time. Once you commit to that project, make sure that you're following the protocol that was laid out for you and that you're gathering that information when you need it in a timely fashion, submitting it when it's needed to be submitted, but making sure that you're doing it consistently, but making the time to do it. Write it on your calendar, put it on your phone. People and we have the extension calendars, we've got personal calendars, we have phones on, I mean, we have phones on our calendar, we have calendars on our phone. So put it on that, remind yourself that it's got to be done. And so, and then go collect that information when needed. And the next point on there is make clear whose responsibility that is. It may be yours, but it may be you have a cooperator that's really interested in wanting to do that. So I have worked with cooperators in the past where I had multiple sites that I was checking on, and that cooperator was retired, and he every now and then he'd just ride along with me and help check traps with me. And so we'd eat lunch, and and we'd converse with one another. And now that guy he turned out to be one of the best friends I've had in my whole entire life. But that guy wanted to learn, and he wanted to see what I was actually observing, what I was doing. And so, but it was clear to him that it was my responsibility to come to him every time. So, but there's other instances where we can have that cooperator be the point person to go do it. Sometimes the specialists will want to do it themselves, but make sure that we know whose responsibility that is. I think I've seen Dr. Travis Miller mad at me twice in my life. Once was whenever I failed to connect with a cooperator, and he harvested a wheat plot when I was an assistant agent in Ellis County. The next was here on campus. I won't talk about that one, but anyway, but I didn't communicate that well enough with that cooperator, and all that data was lost. So we didn't get to harvest that plot. So make sure that we know we're in good communication, and make sure everybody knows exactly what their responsibilities are. And then come up with some sort of a method, some format that you can collect that information, where you can record the date, the location of where this information got taken, maybe a plot number, or some sort of characteristic about whatever it is that you're collecting information on, and put that down in some format. I know Bob showed you the format that he used to collect his cotton data before lunch, and so that was a good one. And Bob came up with that on his own. But whatever format you use, come up with something. And so here's an example of one that came right out of our result demonstration training that we used to do. But it just talks about, has the date here, has the location of where that would be, the plot number, and then we're counting fire ants. So this is ants per chip and mounds per plot. So, and we have 3 different plots there listed. But I always found, ever since I started my extension career, that a little notepad, and that's what I'm holding in my hand there on the right hand side, a notepad I carry around in my front pocket, and that's what I would write down a whole lot of my result demonstration data on. And they're good for other things too. I mean, oftentimes I would write down people's names because I would forget them, so I'd put them on that little notepad, or contacts that I made. But they were always really good to carry around in my pocket. So when I was out in the field, as long as I didn't bend over too much and it came out of my pocket, and that's happened too. But as long as it stayed in my pocket, it was good. But record that information in whatever method that you can, come up with your own system, or use one of those little notepads right there. Like Extension gives those away for nothing. So and they're good promotional tools, and they're also good for collecting data and information. So when we talk about communicating the results, I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but put that in a form that's easy to understand. Again, we can make this as technical as we possibly can, but if we think about our audience and how we need to convey that information and what they're actually looking for, most people are going to be visual learners. And so if they can see something that's colorful and has some shape to it, and then they can start kind of connecting the dots and kind of reading a few things, then it makes more sense to them. We hand them, a document and say, here, read this, and it's, real technical. That may not be appealing to them. So put it in a form where they can understand it just by the visual observation. Let those visuals actually explain the study and what actually took place in that study. So, and we can do that through charts and graphs and then tables. Tables are a pretty quick and easy way to, well, they're not easy, but they are a way that we can convey that information in a form that's pretty easy to understand. And I think it's clean and neat. So when we do that, I think that it's important that we list several things on those tables. I think it's important that we number the table because we may have multiple tables maybe in a report. So let's go ahead and number the tables, give a brief descriptor of what that table actually looks like. And then your headings, make sure they are clear and concise, and so people can follow along with what those individual headings are. And then whatever we're shooting for to be the measuring stick, this one just happens to be yield. Let's go ahead and list that in order. And this goes from largest to smallest in pounds per acre. You'll notice on the far right-hand side. So it's all listed in order. So, and then if any other descriptors, this one has mean and critical value and least significant difference. And then it also talks about moisture. So most folks will shy away from the bottom portion of it, and they'll gravitate right over from the variety all the way to the yield. So typically, but they're clean, they're neat, they're descriptive, and it tells a good story of what actually happened and the information that came out of that. So when we talk about transferring information to our clientele, I just listed several things here that we could, methods that we could, convey that information by. Newsletters or news releases. Again, we want to try to summarize and hit the high points. If we're talking about, transferring information in a newsletter or a news release, because we're not gonna come across well, you'll come across as credible, but you may be hard to understand if you put too much technical jargon in a news release or a newsletter. So just hit the high points. County websites. I think everybody's kind of got a lesson on county websites and how important those are, since we had the COVID lockdown and everybody had a little opportunity to work on their county website. So those are good places to put those reports and those findings that you have. Field day or tour, show that off. Design a field day maybe around a demonstration or demonstrations that you have. A lot of you guys still have crop tours or beef tours or, some sort of ag tour in your county. Those, have become annual events, but throw those demonstrations in those tours. Sometimes that's easier said than done, especially when it comes to things that aren't row crop related activities. But if you can figure out a way to incorporate some of those things that may be maybe beef cattle related, hort related, some of those sort of things, and throw them into some sort of a tour. People really like seeing that. And again, most people are going to be the visual type of a learner. If they can see it, and then they'll say, oh, that's what that is, or that I've read about that, and that's what it looks like. I did have a field day when I was an agent, and it was we planted a little plot of winter forages, and they were all different types of legumes and some winter grasses and some medics. and we had them in little randomized blocks, and I had them all labeled, and that was one of our little tour stops on our tour. And an elderly gentleman that had been in the the cattle business for, gosh, I guess all of his life, and he was well up into his 80s at the time. He came to me afterwards and he said, I've read about all those different types of legumes, but I never knew what they looked like in our county. So, and we actually had that observational tool that he could actually go and look at. So, and I'll come back to the other one, but I mean, demonstration handbooks, we don't require those anymore. Perhaps it'd be a good idea to bring those back, but there's not that requirement right now. But those are always a good tool to educate producers with, and we could have those as a matter of record of what we did on an annual basis, as far as answering those questions in our own county. And then county presentations. Again, I said, once you know the answer, you become that expert, and then present that information in your county. You become that educator. You become that specialist on that subject in your county. And then sometimes you're going to be asked to be a presenter in a neighboring county. And so there's always kind of a semblance of pride that comes along with being able to do that. Whenever you are considered that expert and you can go to that other county and present information. Somebody told me once that the definition of an expert was a drip under pressure, or it was a person 50 miles away from their hometown. So, but you can be that expert in your own hometown by doing a good job with these result demonstrations. Perhaps a little bit more technical is doing posters. I'm a big proponent of posters because these can serve a whole lot of different purposes. We can write them up in this technical format. As you see here, it's not too technical, but it is a little bit wordy. But if we stop and actually read, there's a lot of concise information in here. Some photographs, some charts, some graphs, what we're actually trying to accomplish. And I would make these posters just using PowerPoint and just change the parameters on my PowerPoint slide and get these things printed. And these would hang on the wall in the extension office. And so when people would come in, I would have the wall lined with posters of demonstrations that I had done. So that served another purpose too, because that poster was also entered in the TCAAA poster contest, which in turn was entered in the National County Agent Association poster contest. And you could have the opportunity to win a few awards by doing that, just by doing your job and taking it that one step further, and being able to display that information in a different format than you may have thought previous. But all the information that came out of that result demonstration write-up is on this poster. Same thing with this one as well. So this one just happened to be the grasshopper demonstration that I did with Dr. Roy Parker. So, but again, tells the story, tells how we did it, and then some conclusions. So now if we're talking about using some proprietary type products, maybe in a more applied research type setting, so you're working with specialists and we just have some numbered or products, then we probably need to be pretty careful about promoting one thing over the other with something like that. So just be aware of that and make sure that whoever the specialist is you're working with that is designing that it's okay to actually release that data. So just be aware of that. But anything else, named products, that's perfectly okay to do. So infographics, I for whatever reason, I could not find an infographic that had a result demonstration in it, but I think it'd be a great tool. This just happens to be one of an in-depth summary that one of my agents did in Oasis County. And, infographics, pretty good way to share data and really tells a good story without being too wordy and too technical. So, and last but not least, here is our, this is our kind of our outline of our official result demonstration format, the way that we would report it. And I think it's a pretty good lead in to what Mr. Bachelor is going to talk about after me. He's going to talk about how to format that and type of information goes where and how it needs to be worded. So, and this was me working in a vineyard, cowboy viticulturalist. So back in the day, so at the Napa of Texas, Austin County. So, but these are all the different headings that you would have in that report format, kind of the methodology that you would follow. So with that, any questions?
Okay, we're gonna go ahead and move along in the interest of time. Next up, we have Mr. Brent Bachelor, and Brent is a regional program leader in the Central Region, and Brent is, in my opinion, he and Shackleford are two of the best that I've ever seen in terms of doing and utilizing result demonstrations and applied research in an educational program. And so I'm really glad that we got both of these guys on the program today. But Brent, I'll turn it over to you to talk a little bit about the format for reporting results.
Yeah, I wanted to turn my camera on because I wanted to see everybody to see that I had a coat and tie on today just for y'all. No, in reality, I'm up at Vernon. We're doing the spring meeting in Vernon today, so just happened to have that on. But hopefully you're impressed, right? So go ahead.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, I'm glad somebody is, Phillip.
I couldn't even turn my camera on, so I'm impressed though.
So my task today is to talk about the format, but I would be remiss if I didn't just like a lot of the other folks have talked about how important result demonstration and applied research is to your program effort. And you may not know it, but it's going to be some of the best work you're going to do and some of the best communication pieces that you have available to you to help convey information to producers. I was thinking about, sometimes you're introduced new technology, and my first experience with that was when I was an assistant agent and we were working with metsulfuron to take Pensacola Bahia grass out of coastal Bermuda up in East Texas. And that was like, to those folks, when we had that field day, they'd been fighting, the Bahia for a long time in their hay meadows. And it was like that, a miracle to them to see those plots and to see them how clean they were, and how it took the Bahia grass that was pretty prevalent in a Bermuda grass meadow out. And so I was kind of hooked right from the beginning. And I've had the honor of working with a lot of really good people through the years, IPM agents and specialists, and Dr. Parker's on here today. And by the time I got to work with Dr. Parker, I'd been around a while, but I still learned something every day from him, and Mo Way over in Beaumont, who recently retired, and they helped me do a better job at what I was doing. So sometimes you're introducing new technology. The other thing that sticks out is, some of the first GMO cotton that a lot of growers saw was in our plots. I think it was Delta Pine 33, which was just a bolt. It ended up being Bollgard, but it was just a BT cotton. It wasn't Roundup ready yet. So you get to do some things that when you look back on them, it's pretty significant in the life of you as well as the producers. So don't ever shy away or think you're not ready, because we can certainly prepare you and get you some help to do the things you need to do make things better for your growers. So my task today is just kind of to go through the format. Phillip talked a little bit about that, and Blaine's going to talk next about how to write in the writing style we like for you to use. But this is more about how we want you to present so we can be consistent across, present the information so we can be consistent across the board. Now, you may work with a specialist and they may write up the data and the demonstration in a little different way that fits their needs better, either for a promotion packet or a report to a company that they're working with. But for us, this is going to be the standard that we use to present the results. So we'll go ahead and get started. So as Dr. Shackleford said, we want to clearly communicate the results. So we want you to follow the format, because hopefully what we're working on is a place to kind of vet and put these demonstrations and applied research projects, particularly up in a place where we can all get to them and utilize them across the agency, as well as hopefully open that up to end users, producers and growers and folks that would be interested in that, to gain access to that and gain that knowledge that we've helped put together. So the format is important. We want you to follow that and use a clear and concise writing style. Blaine's going to talk about that. This is not a place to write any mystery writings or add any flower into the situation. It's just about reporting the results or sometimes the lack of results of the project that you're working on. As Dr. Shackleford said, it's good to use different formats, graphs, and tables when appropriate to deliver this information. And I used to change that depending on the audience, because some audiences, like it in a table form better. I found that growers like graphs, with then followed by, information about timing and rates or whatever we were trying to explain. So this is a picture of the template on the right there. It's just a result demonstration report. It's pretty plain Jane. We may have to get Marcom to spice them up a little bit. I don't know. But for us, it works fairly well. Now, these templates are available from your regional program leader. Hopefully, we'll find a place to put them within the new web scheme so everybody can find them. But if you need one before then, just ask your RPL, or maybe they're going to send them out to you. And we've got different ones for demonstrations and applied research, and different pictures depending on the subject matter or the type of applied research or demonstration you're doing. So first, let's talk about the sections. Of course, we have a heading and then a summary and objective. So in the heading, it's just what it is. It's the name of the project, just a quick name of what it is, who the cooperators were, your name and any other agents that worked on it, as well as any specialist or industry folks that might have helped you with it. And we'll show you some examples as we go through. The summary is just a quick overview of the project and the results. So you say, well, why do we put the summary first? Well, sometimes people just want to read the quick highlights of the situation first off to see if it's really what they're interested in and what they're looking for, or maybe they just have a minute to look at it and decide if that's something they need to do some more reading about or looking at, as far as more of the details as follows. The next section is the objectives. So that's basically what it is. It's the objectives. What was our goal? As Dr. Shackleford says, what was the question that we were trying to answer? And how did that project come about, and why are we doing it? Then we have our materials and methods. It's the details, all the things that you did. It would be, how you replicated it, what treatments did you use, what were the rates, what was the timing, what was all those things that went into making a successful demonstration that you've learned about throughout this training. Then we have the results and discussion. That's really the meat and potatoes. That's where you get into the details and you put your graph and you talk about observations you may have seen or things like that. We'll show you more detail about that in the examples, but this is where most people would go to see if it's something that they want to adopt and then put into practice on their own operation. Then the conclusion kind of wraps it up. You finish up any details that you didn't do up above, and the acknowledgement is pretty straightforward, is where you give folks credit. Your cooperators, maybe the folks that provided product for you to use, or the specialist, or whoever the case may be. So here's some examples of what we're talking about. So this is a pretty straightforward heading. Yeah, it's the Clay County quail indexing demonstration from 2017. Tells who was involved, you know, Bill and Amanda and Dr. Rawlings. He didn't put his cooperator up front. I think his is used in the example for the acknowledgement, where he says thank you to the cooperators that he did the quail indexing project on. The summary, this is a pretty basic summary. Sites were established in 2016 to research efficacy of labeled and experimental herbicides when applied to mesquite as a water-based basal treatment. Evaluations have been conducted approximately 3 months after treatment, 1 year after treatment, and the final evaluation will be conducted 2 years after treatment. So it just kind of gives people an idea of what was going on. They can see, oh, it's mesquite, it's a, you know, an individual plant treatment, and basal applications. So the summary is just kind of where you give an overview. The objectives, here's the objectives from that same project. So mesquite is one of the most common noxious plant invading Texas rangelands, you know, kind of a common known thing. So the objective was to obviously see if the products that were available at the time, including, you know, some newer ones, and comparing the new ones to the old standard mixes. You can see this was on Envora, which is, you know, still a really new product, but he was comparing it to Garlon 4 as a basal treatment. And it says currently this treatment of Garlon 4 mixed with the basal oil serves as the treatment option for land managers who want to avoid, or they are prohibited from using the standard treatments of diesel mixed with triclopyr for basal mesquite control. So this is a water-based, non-oil-based treatment, so which is a little bit different anyway, and then comparing a new product to one of the old standbys for that particular type of treatment. Materials and method. So objectives are just what they are, just kind of why did you do it? As Dr. Shackleford said, you're trying to answer a question. What was the question you were trying to answer? So here the objective was to compare and document effective of several new herbicides and methods. So they were comparing a water-based basal treatment to where you couldn't use, for some reason, if you didn't want to or couldn't use the oil-based, like the diesel and triclopyr, which is the standard basal treatment. Materials and method. This, as I said, is where you put the details, get into the very minute details of the project, depending on what it is and what you're doing. And this one, you can see that he even put that they use ConeJet X3 nozzles, which you think, well, that's pretty good detail, but that's what you want to do. This is where people are going to go if they discovered an interest in it, and you try to answer all the questions. If they're going to go out and buy and apply this product, what do they need to be looking at? Right down to what kind of nozzles they used, how they did the application, You can see that they sprayed to the point of wet, but not dripping 12 inches up the stem. So you want to get in really good details in the materials and methods. So even if somebody, well, you had these result demonstration results, applied research results on a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper at the feed store, they could pick them up and learn enough about the project and read this part of it and know, well, I know I need to do this, and oh yeah, I need that kind of nozzle. Oh, I see that I have to apply it 12 inches up the stem to make it work right and to be effective. So this is probably the most detailed part about it, the materials and method as far as what you did and how you did it. You know, it's very much part of teaching people how to actually do it without being there to actually tell them what to do. You can see you could also use tables. I know you can't see that one very well, but it's just an example of the information that they provided, because they have the site, the date, what time that they sprayed, the wind speed and direction, the air temperature, the soil moisture, the relative humidity. So very much detail in the materials and methods, particularly for an applied research, or in this case, something that you wanted people to take home and utilize. So a lot of details. And then you get to your results and discussion. So here they went back and reiterated that they evaluated, were conducted 90 days after treatment to determine the percent defoliation, and 1 year after treatment to see the percent mortality, and then the final percent mortality being conducted 2 years after treatment. So it's a long process. Many times when we were doing applied research, replicated trials, we wanted to try to get 3 years worth of data before we wanted to really average, particularly if it was a new product or a new use for a product. And we were trying to get that as a recommended application, that we would have to do that over a 3 year period. So sometimes it's a one-time deal and you're just showing off a known technology, but sometimes you're actually trying to find effective ways to solve problems that takes a little more time and a little more effort than what you would assume a typical result demonstration would. As Dr. Shackleford said, graphs, I found graphs work really well, particularly visually with growers, because they can see the different treatments and the different products, and the efficacy or how well they worked across the plots. And then the conclusion, this is what it is. After looking at various rates of herbicides as a water-based basal treatment on mesquite, it appears that Method and Envora, which was the two new products they were testing, both offer excellent control when utilized as a water-based treatment. However, at this time, Method and Envora are labeled to be used on grazed areas. So threw a little bit of label information in there. In other words, you couldn't use that in a hay meadow or a place where you were going to harvest forage mechanically, only in pastures that were going to be grazed. So just a little caveat to throw in there to say, hey, you make sure you read the label and know where you're using this stuff. So acknowledgements, as I said, here they're thanking Dr. Dan Boland for allowing them to utilize the Eagle Wind Ranch to run the quail indexing study. Also like to thank Holt and Connor for their many hours of help setting up the quail indexing study and collecting of data. It's just, acknowledgements is just what it is. You're just thanking the people that were involved, giving them some recognition, and recognizing their input. So the format, as I said, was pretty straightforward and available from your regional program leader, or we'll probably put these somewhere on the web. And we also want to make sure that on all these templates, even if you don't use the template, you need to make sure that you include this statement. That's basically our statement that said trade names and commercial products in this report are included only for better understanding and clarity. References to commercial products or trade names is made with the understanding that no discrimination is intended and no endorsement by Texas AgriLife Extension Service, which that should be Texas A&M, right? And Texas A&M University system is implied. Readers should realize that the results from one experiment do not represent conclusive evidence that the same response would occur where conditions vary. So if you go back to that materials and methods on that basal treatment, they put down the temperature, the humidity, and all those things. So people, you know, if they try this and it didn't work for them as it did in the treatment, you go back and say, well, what was the parameters or how did you do it? And that's important, both in the materials methods section to put that, as well as having this statement on there that says, this is what happened at this particular place at this particular time, and it may not be indicative of your results. Or what is the old statement? Your results may vary. So not always going to turn out the same way that it did in the experiment. Sometimes it's for the better and sometimes it's for the worse. All right, I think I'm giving y'all back some time, but are there any questions about format? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. We have the format. We'll make that available to you. And if you have any questions, you know, talk to the specialist or the RPL and they'll be glad to help you work through that.
Hey, thank you, Brent. We're going to wrap things up today talking about the basics of technical writing and just some basic information about how best to present information to growers. And I just recommend, if you've never done it, read as much as you can, as many reports as you can, and develop your vocabulary and use that to help you to gain some confidence in using the style that most of these reports are written in. But to talk to you more in detail about this, we have Blaine Reed. Blaine is the extension agent IPM in Hale County. And I'm going to turn it over to you, Blaine, and let you share some information.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I'm pretty much honored to be mentioned as speaker for this group, and I appreciate the opportunity. Is everybody able to see my screen okay? So, yeah, we were asked to talk in and present how to make these technical papers, which is kind of daunting. And I sure understand where folks are coming from on being nervous about wanting or being able to write these in a good enough way to feel technical about it. And trust me, guys, I'm here to say that I probably have a couple of high school English teachers that are falling over dead today that we're presenting this or rolling over in the grave. But and you ought to relax a little bit. We were talking about a little while ago a format here for these templates that I've actually been using for quite some time. When I first started several years ago, we were required to write 2 of these on these result demonstration reports. And, you know, we did kind of view those as a check mark. And I didn't really like that. And I also understood that I had to make an IPM annual report anyway. So what we started doing is for all the trials that we did is we just went ahead and wrote every one of these up, and they should be, and they go into our IPM report. And how to fit these together, it's not that difficult once you get rolling. It actually can be you know, a little bit formulaic if you want to. Now I go to Beltwide ESA every year, but I don't present every year. I really wait to make those peer review and preceding papers, really when I think we've got something big, but still this general format with an abstract, introduction, materials and methods, it's still the same thing, but it's not going to be a peer reviewed. And whether we're putting together, you know, these professional papers, and I hope, and I can clearly see from across the state that we have several folks that are doing really good work out here in this organization. And I really do hope you go ahead and present a lot of these at professional locations, as we can see here that we've done on special occasion. But more of anything else, I just really want to talk about how to fit these forms in and how to make the time and make it worthwhile to get these in, to get your work recorded. I'm going to bounce over here to my 2019 Annual IPM Report real quick. And, you know, this isn't even required anymore for IPM agents, but I do think it's an outstanding way to go, an outstanding outlet of information. And you can see here in 2019, I still had responsibility of Floyd County. And I don't have my 2020 because I'm still finishing that up. So I understand the time constraints, but these projects are certainly very worthwhile. And I'm going to slide down on some of these. And I also hope that some of these things do become a requirement. You may be inspired now that we're focusing a lot more on these result demonstrations and research trials done locally, that you'll take advantage of the format and make a record of these projects written out very well. I'll share some advantages where these have helped out us in the past. Of course, this outlet right here, you know, we're putting our in-depths and other things in here as well, but every single project that we worked on, research and applied demonstration projects are written up and on these forms, like I say, in a fairly formatted way. And like I say, working on these things can be a little bit formulaic, but it should not be hard. It's actually fairly easy when you get down and looking at a lot of these. So bouncing over to one that we've done this year. This was just a simple bollworm population monitoring. And we put this on our template. We put our identification in here, you know, who's done it, where the locations are. We thank our growers. This is a little bit different than your standard peer review. This is a lot more written for growers, and it needs to be written that way. While it is a scientific write-up, just write what you've done. It doesn't have to be difficult. You guys are doing the work, and like I said, it doesn't have to be difficult. So there are a ton of books written for how to do these technical writings, and I urge you to take advantage of them. But I'm just going to go through examples here of what I typically do. And some of this has gone over a little bit earlier, and that's great. So every one of these templates, you've got an objective. You need to write exactly down why you made this effort. Now, why was this done? Well, you know, we were sitting here with the adult bollworm population monitoring. Well, it's pretty simple. This effort was made to monitor the adult bollworm population and trends through the growing season. Next, we're coming up to those materials and methods. And while this might be daunting, it shouldn't be. Just write down, and I do try to make a point of writing these while it's in scientific method to the growers at a level that they will understand, but still maintain that level of professionalism. And you do that simply by writing to that level. Materials and methods, this is simply what we did. Also, when I started doing this and was reviewing a lot of these that had been done before, there weren't a lot of pictures in them. I changed that up, and I haven't gotten in trouble for it yet. Where pictures are worth 1,000 words. especially to a grower who comes in and looks at these materials and methods. They may not want to look at all these details, but they also, this needs to be a referable reference material, citable source, and someone will also possibly need to repeat your methodology and your protocols. All that needs to be written in here. Pretty simple stuff. Results and discussion, as I've worked with young agents, a lot of them have wanted to write too many details here in the results. This should just be an example of what happened exactly. And then as we come into the conclusions, this is where you can expand your thoughts quite a bit more. I'm going to bounce to a few other things. This last year, we worked on the sugarcane aphid control quite a bit. Surfactant impact is one of the things we wanted to look at. So here we are again with the same template. You've got your summary. Actually, this summary is the last thing I write. If you sit down and try to technically go through the summary first, what you'll find it very, very difficult. Write that objective first. And our hypothesis statement is right here in the objective. Evaluate the impact on chemical control measures for sugarcane aphid in grain sorghum by various surfactant products available in West Texas agricultural producers. That was our objectives. And then we simply wrote out what we did. We conducted this at the halfway experiment station, at the research pivot, the variety we listed, and the dates we did everything. Bulk planted, agronomic needs were met, give nods to everybody who had a hand in things. I also, like I say, I like to use charts, graphs. They are worth 1,000 words. A lot of these trials, we are using a completely randomized block design. A lot of growers, when we talk about p-values and ANOVAs, they may not understand these things, but writing it to the level that they should be able to absorb is extremely important, while making it a citable source. That sounds, like I say, a tall order, but we're just writing down what we did. When it comes to talking about the stats and statistics, they are in here. How everything is run and stats are operated, they're in here. And I've made a point over the years of working with my growers that they'll understand what this means. Is this, p-value is less than 0.05. We've got to a point with a lot of growers reading these that they understand that we're at least, through the quote unquote magic of statistics, that we're at least 95% sure that the results that we have shown here today are repeatable elsewhere. If you follow these procedures, we're 95% sure. And, I really caution our growers, and I encourage you guys to always include the stats. Even in a simplified form, always include those stats and how you got to it. I like to use ARM, Statistical Analysis Program. That's something we certainly jump on quite a bit here. It's a standard. It's fairly easy to use. And if you understand even a small amount of stats, you can really work things pretty well. So everything is written up, and these are also outstanding examples of what you're doing in the area. When we talk about that, we're training people, we're working in the communities. These write-ups are going to be banners for years and years. Earlier, I mentioned that we did the bollworm population, and it's written up. It's in our annual IPM report. And thanks to a pretty long history, we now have a population monitoring of bollworms in Hale and Swisher County that goes back to the late 1960s, because these have been written up year in and year out pretty much continuously from that period of time, the different agents that have been here. That's pretty valuable information to reference back over many, many years. And I think pretty much everything we're doing is pretty much important work and needs to be cited. We have field days. We had field days where we were highlighting some of this work. But if the people were at the field day, that's great. What about somebody that missed it that needs the information, or you're being able to come back and cite these things? So absolutely jump on board with these and make them work. The results and discussion. I really urge you guys to just keep this to the bare minimum about what actually happened. Don't expand thoughts too much here in the results and discussion. Here's the results at 4 days after trial. Just jump right in with what happened. At 4 days after the treatment, the upper leaf counts shown significant differences from the untreated check. Write those things out exactly the way they were. Quote your stats. Don't put a lot of fluff in here. Use good charts and graphs. Especially on something that in this chart and graph, it's a little bit different because we do have like sugarcane aphid numbers just can go astronomical in a certain area in those plots. And if I didn't come up with a different way of presenting that data, we would lose a lot of these small nuances in here. So just understand your subject matter and what's important to growers and put it in there. Moving on with different aspects, we, of course, in this particular instance, recorded the sugarcane aphid numbers. The next paragraph, we're dealing with damage ratings over time and come back to yields. Now, the conclusions is really the area where you can underscore some impact. And the conclusions from that data, in this case, hinted that there was some benefit to using a surfactants in with our chemical treatment here. When we looked at Servanto by itself versus the untreated check, of course, using Servanto treating the aphids on time was proven to be a benefit again. But we had some numeric advantages here, but we didn't have significant differences at that 0.05 level. In the conclusions in this particular case, I was able to expand out and say, when we ran this at the 0.25 level, we did get significant differences in this case. So in this case, when we're explaining this to growers, here in the conclusions and the summary back up top, we're saying we're 75% sure that we've got some differences here. So these impact statements here in the conclusions are a good thing to go with. And of course, then we finish up with our acknowledgements again. Run through another example, if I'm not making everybody too dizzy. Spray tip impacts. We noted that we're not getting the control of thrips in cotton. Now that we're having to use the auxin tips, in West Texas, we'll typically mix our first auxin over the top spray with a control for the thrips. We're not getting the control that we noted there, so we wanted to run a trial on it. This one happened to be sponsored by Cotton Incorporated as well, including that in this template. It's pretty variable. Come back where I've written this summary at last. I've written the entire paper, and I'll come back in and fill in the summary. This is the way I'll typically like to do that. Now, most of your abstracts and papers will like to try to keep this to one paragraph, and it certainly does need to be short, but I found it a little bit easier for me to get my materials and methods and kind of basic results in here, and then conclusions in a second paragraph. Of course, it's standard objective again, a different objective. Materials and methods, again, This isn't overly difficult, and it doesn't have to be technical. Take good notes in the field, record what you're doing, and write it down. The hardest part of writing these out in the technical side is really just getting started. We're turning out 15 to 30 of these a year on most seasons. Just writing out what's happening, making sure that in these materials and methods that if anybody else wants to pick these up, they can understand them well enough to replicate this trial in another location. Our damage rating in this particular trial is pretty important. We're using visual aids of every sort. Again, our results and discussion, this is the bare bones. This is what happened. When we evaluated is recorded up here. Get your results out. Sometimes you see something, sometimes you don't. And use the proper terminology when you can. No significant differences means we were not at least 95% sure. Yes. Good charts and graphs are always important, and working these things out. Again, I've got examples upon examples of how to work these. And like I say, the hardest part is just getting it down. We're doing a lot of good work. And a lot of times we're not recording these things and reporting them. And I do hope that some of these will become standard, that we are required to record some of these in our counties, because it would be a shame to lose this information. And just one example I'll share real quick of how just writing every one of these projects down on our template that come from AgriLife to host these. Back when we were first dealing with the sugarcane aphid in West Texas, and a year or two later, we were seeing green bugs in the field as well. And there was quite a bit of debate with the sorghum growers and Dr. Brent Bean as to whether the control products for one species would work for another. We had the data. We didn't publish the data anywhere but here, but because we did do the write-up in this way where growers could understand it, we were able to get that information from a few years prior out. And I do believe saved quite a bit of time and money and disaster really being averted in that situation. So I urge you guys to just do it. Just do these together. It's not really that difficult. And I'm kind of running on examples here. Is there any questions out there?
Thank you, Blaine. We appreciate that. We will have what we're going to call a tier 2 training that will be more focused in the future on statistical analysis and some more of the nuts and bolts of stats and things of that nature. But anyway, that will be announced at a future date. I want to thank Rebecca today. Again, she keeps us on track and keeps us from getting in the bar ditch. And Rebecca, we appreciate you for that. And anyway, if there's not any questions, I'm sure if anybody has any question whatsoever, don't hesitate at all to pick up the phone or send an email to one of the speakers today. And I know that they'd be more than happy to help you. We're all in this together. This isn't a deal where you're going to know everything. You're going to have to rely on people across the county line and specialists in other parts of the state, maybe to help you figure things out the way you may need to have them figured out. So anyway, with that, we'll close it for today, and we hope you'll have a good day and a good week.